welcome to another episode of Fantasy Reality. And in today's episode, I'm going to talk about autism and other mental disorders, and how they might relate to a fantasy, or even science fiction for that matter. Let me see here. Well, let's start off with a little bit about me. And that is, if I haven't mentioned this before, or you haven't heard me say it, I'm going to tell you. I have autism, a high functioning form. I'll be honest with you, I don't know all that much about it. I leave that to professionally educated idiots who don't understand a thing about autism themselves. Yeah, because who really does understand what autism is? I don't. I don't understand what it's all about. But I do know what I have, and I know what I'm like. Some of it is, I got some certain obsessions, such as making these videos and talking about one thing or another. I was gardening last year for a couple of years. I got a little garden hasn't been doing so well, and now I'm talking about fantasy stuff. You know? I have this tendency to make the videos, try to make them at least every week. But, let's see here, what else about me? I like to talk to myself a lot when nobody's around. I'll admit to that one. Carry on full conversations. Another thing is, I'm honest. Blunt honest. I'll be honest, if I think something is stupid, I say it's stupid. And usually it's like, I'm thinking it in my brain, it's like, if that's stupid. And the problem is, by the time I translated that, my mouth already said it. Hasn't earned me too many friends. I also have a tendency to go off on tangents from this to this. It takes me a little while to get back to here. I'm certain you've probably seen a few of that in my videos. What else? I have a bit of a hard time socializing because of my little quirks, as it were. I do have a tendency to be focused on certain things. For instance, if I'm talking about, say, some random book, I'll talk on about this random book. If nothing else, I'll be able to test if merely showing the book is what caused my last episode's issue of the fuzziness. Hopefully not. Like I said, I go on and on about certain topics that I'm interested in. I have some other social issues. One thing is in school, when I was done taking a test, it'd be like, I just get this nervous twitch where I'm just, I gotta do something with my hands, and, well, it turns out, after doing a test, I would read the book. It kept me calm, kept me distracted enough for the other 20 kids in the classroom to finish up their test, because in many cases I was usually the first one done. I did a lot of reading of various topics. Usually I read fantasy or science fiction, or any other book I could get my hands on, for that matter, because it kept me quiet. It kept me from doing outbursts. And that sort of stuff. So, how would that relate to a fantasy series, to a fantasy story, or a science fiction story? Well, let's see if I can find the one book. Well, I just bring this guy out. He's part of the series, anyways. Terry Pratchett. He wrote a book. He wrote a story called "Making Money," involving for the Discworld series, and involves Moist von Lipwig. Now, Moist von Lipwig, he's not the character I'm going to talk about, but he does meet up with the character, and that is, I can't quite remember his name, but let's just call him Oswald. He looks like an Oswald, apparently. And what this guy did is apparently counterfeiting. And apparently his counterfeits were so good, they made the real things look like counterfeits. Problem is, counterfeiting, criminal offense. But Moist, he himself a former criminal who's more or less reformed, sees potential in Oswald and decides, okay, let's see if I can get this guy to do the job. Well, as it turns out, he's got a certain amount of criminal. The problem with Oswald is you've got these various tendencies that do things that are just a little socially awkward and that sort of stuff. And it's like, to say that about his criminal habits. Pictures. And it's like, so, Moist, he talks to an Igor about the possibility of getting rid of these disruptive elements. So, Igor, he does to remove the disruptive elements and places them in a turp. And of course, the guy is more or less normalized. And so, Moist, he writes a copy for this banknote, that idea he wants to get out. Well, the guy creates an exact replica of what Moist had made, which is not very good as far as Moist was concerned, because Moist himself admits he's not an artist. Whereas the guy, when he had all those issues, was an artist. And Moist reluctantly tells Igor, okay, put everything back in his head. We need whatever it was that's in there, in that turnip. So, well, yeah, the guy's got all that stuff back in his head. So, right there, magic and or science, trying to cure a guy's mental disorder, doesn't work at all. Yeah. So how would a guy like that, so how would someone say autism, for instance, function in that society? Well, I know me. I don't know anybody else. I mean, I've known of people. The place where I live has a walk called Step Up for Autism. Give a bit of a shout out to that. And I am one of the guest speakers, and every year I give out a speech. And this year we celebrated our 10th walk. And we had some happy. There was over 100 people there at any rate. A lot of families, people who have autism. Well, like I said, let's go with me. I mean, I know me. So, let's go to, say, the 3 classes that tend to pop up in these adventure series. The fighter, the archer, and the mage. For the fighter, I don't see myself being that physical. I was not interested in sports. I had no interest in doing, like lifting weights or taking the football and running down 100 yards and either shoving people out of the way or tackling people or anything like that. So I was also not interested. I did do a bit of wrestling and a bit of soccer. Well, what we call soccer and what everybody else calls football. And by the previous football, I mean American football. I did, like I said, did a little bit of soccer and a little bit of wrestling, a little bit of track, some running, and some shot put and discus throwing, but didn't really do too well. I'm not really that interested in physical activity or sports. Let's see here. The archer. I've tried using the bow. I might have the strength for it, but I just don't have the patience for it. I don't think I could do. I don't think I could spend a year or so learning how to properly use a bow and get good at using a bow. I don't think I could do that. And let's take hunting for instance. Hunting, I don't have the patience for that. I'm setting. So, setting in general, I don't really have the patience for it. Unless I'm doing something. For instance, talking to the camera, which is being turned into a video. I don't have the patience for that. I don't have the patience to just sit still. As you can see. I have to be doing something. I have to be moving my arms. And sometimes I just get up and walk around. Because I got to be doing something. So, being an archer and just... you don't really hold it for that long. But like I said, I've tried it, but I'm just not that good. If I spent a year on it, or even with the fighting stuff, if I spent like a year on that, yeah, I might get good at it. In fact, I might get really good at it. My brothers, both of which who played football, they've said, if you ever got interested in it, you'd be really good at it, especially since I could come up with the various plans. And that is where the mage might be more suited to my skill set, as it were, because I am constantly reading. Because if you just take a good look at my room, you might notice I have a bookshelf right here, and it's just filled with books. I also have a bunch of movies. Again, research. Let's call that research material. I just read constantly. So, and what do mages do? They do a lot of reading. They constantly go, okay, read this one. Okay, so that's how you use that price then. that sort of stuff. They're known for using this. Although, in my personal opinion, I think they also need to work on their muscles a bit, so that way they can at the very least run away! You know, or perhaps even learn how to use a melee weapon, and if possible, maybe how to use a bow. Yeah, that's a topic for another story, for another. Well, actually, that is a topic that I talked about in a previous video. But like I said, the whole reading books and that sort of stuff, the gaining knowledge, that is something I could do. I could be a mage, or any class that's derived from being a mage. I could do that sort of stuff. I mean, I could see someone with my various issues doing that sort of stuff. I possibly could see them being a healer, or perhaps being a bit of a hermit. It's just sitting around contemplating all by themselves. That sort of thing I could see myself doing. Just contemplating myself, doing research in the library, that sort of thing. Yeah, I could see myself doing that sort of stuff. So, how would that affect a fantasy? Well, some people, like I, would probably have a lot of social issues. I'll admit, I had a lot of social issues growing up, and I still do have social issues growing up, and some of which I'm trying to work on. Let's see here. What else up? I mean, it's kind of hard to figure it out, a little bit. I mean, you have to think, how would this affect somebody? How would someone who has autism function in a society like this? With me, I know I have a routine of sorts. And I could see them having some sort of assistant whose job is, okay, this guy's talking on about this, might be a good idea to distract them a little bit, or explain to these guys who don't know what in the world he's talking about a little bit about this guy. It's like, he does happen to have this thing going on, and he has a tendency to da-da-da-da. And I wish the other guy's like, oh, I understand. Yeah. Yeah, but it's... to be honest, it is personally hard for me to talk about it a little bit. I just don't think about it or talk about it. Talk about, and on the other hand, when I'm talking about stuff that I'm interested in, oh fuck, go on and on. Which is why these videos tend to be a little long. But like I said, could someone with a mental disorder, with a disorder such as autism, function in such a society? Yes, they could. Even in our society, we do have people who have autism and other mental disorders who are fully functioning and contributing members of society, doing one job or another that the average people, the normal people who don't think the way that those who have autism think. Because a lot of people who have autism, they can just look at something and they can figure out some something totally different. And it's like, how'd you figure that out? I said, oh, I just did this and did this and did this. It just came together. I don't know how to explain it. And to be honest, I wouldn't know how to explain it. I wouldn't know how to explain how I am able to read these books, the books I read, very quickly. I mean, sometimes it's like, okay, I already know this part. Okay, I know a little bit about, I know enough about this guy. I'm able to just keep on reading. If I'm really interested in something, and I got the time, a 300-page book I could get done within 3 hours. That is something I know I'm good at. Yeah. These books, I sit down, I can get through them. And I mean, the Discworld series is comprised of 42 novels. Some of them shorter than others, I'll admit to that. By ordering 3 at a time, I was able to get through most of them relatively quickly. I was able to easily do a book, actually 2, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, easily before the books themselves were due. And usually it's like by the time I put in, basically it's like if I've turned into one and I'm halfway through the second, I'm like, okay, order up the next 3. And then turn in the next book, second book, and by the time I'm done with book number 3, the next 3 have come in, and I was able to, I have to say, I was able to read all 42 of them within, well, I'd have to say, from about, let's see, November, December, January, March, 5 months, 42 books, roughly. I mean, I might be a little off, but like I said, I was able to read them real quick, and of course you have to wait for the books to come in, of course, but I was able to read them fairly quickly. And that is one of my things. I can read quick. And so apply that to a mage whose life is dedicated to reading these tomes and books on knowledge and spells. Yeah. I could see someone who can do that doing that. I could see them being a very proficient mage, possibly, if they practice their spells often enough. And likewise, I'm real good where math is concerned, so if they have something like an accounting, yeah, accounting, the mouse good at math, real good at math. Still good. Sometimes like, I know the answer, I just spat it out. Don't ask me how I got to it, though. And that is one of my problems, is I know the answer right the way, I just don't know how I got to it. And I'm just able to take a glance at the number and say, oh, 42. Don't ask me if that's the meaning of life, but I know the answer is 42. Languages, I'll be honest, I had a hard time learning Spanish. Different language, you know, some kind of Latin. On the other hand, somebody whose interest was in languages. I could see them possibly being a very good translator. I could see them doing that. What else? Well, magic, already covered that. Science in general. If there is science in this fantasy world, yeah, and they're doing research. I could see them doing that sort of stuff. I could see them doing that. I could see them do a lot of these intellectual things that other people would have a hard time, even sometimes occasionally have a hard time grasping even the basics of. And that is something to think on. And there's a whole lot of other things to go on for that matter. So let's get to, basically, someone with a mental disorder, I wouldn't say it's impossible for them to succeed in a fantasy society. Difficult? I'll admit. I've had my difficulties, I've had my ups, and I've had my downs. But I can honestly tell you, I've got a decent amount of success in my life. I have a job. It's not the world's greatest, but it's a job. It puts food on the table. Am I social? I have my difficulties, but I am outgoing in the community. Do I talk a lot? Yes. So, like I said, someone with a mental disorder, yeah, they could probably do it. That being said, do a bit of research, and don't just go on Wikipedia and research LLK. No. Don't do that. Because that sort of thing upsets me. I don't like seeing movies where you have someone who claims and that they have this disorder, or someone says, "Oh, he's got this," and I watch these guys, and it's like, that doesn't even resemble me. On the other hand, so do some first-person research. Volunteer at, say, a group home. Do some, minor job. The maintenance. Such as cleaning the garbage, that sort of stuff, and perhaps assisting these people, these caretakers who deal with people who have the disorder you're trying to learn about. Because each person with autism is different. You have people like me. I'm on the high functioning end of the spectrum. But then you have people who are on the lower end of the spectrum, who may be confined to a wheelchair, who may not be physically capable of walking, and might not even have the ability to speak. Who happen to be 20 years old, but act like they're 3 years old. And sometimes when I talk about that sort of stuff, it makes me realize how lucky I am. I could have been one of those guys who was indeed stuck in a wheelchair, nonverbal, not even able to communicate. As my mother says, I speak for those who cannot. So I'm telling you, if you want to learn about someone who's got a mental disorder, talk to them. Sit down with them. Walk in their shoes and learn from them. Don't just learn from a medical book. Don't just learn from online sources. Learn from the person themselves. Especially if you want to incorporate that sort of behavior into your book or into your game or into your movie or whatever. Learn about whatever disorder it is that you're trying to incorporate. Well, that's it for this episode of Fantasy Reality. Let me tell you, a lot of this stuff for me is indeed reality. Because, as I said, I do have autism.